Hello, my name is Jason Vaughn, and I am the legal counsel for the Kentucky Realtors. I'm here today to talk to you about what happens if your county clerk office closes. As I'm filming this remotely from my home, I am aware that a couple of counties have closed their offices completely. This includes Fayette County, as well as a few additional counties. So the question becomes, how does this affect any transactions that you may be involved in, both in an affected county and in counties outside? Well, in the affected county, you should know, if you didn't know already, that for most of the counties in the state, all of the county clerk's offices were already closed to the public. That means that in general, somebody off the street couldn't come in there, couldn't utilize the services of the deed book and various other resources. And that didn't really make that big of a deal because most people did all that online anyway. Though in a few, the more rural counties, that has put an impact on transactions. But generally speaking, let's talk about what happens now. If in fact your county clerk office closes, it may affect your transactions less in the short term, more in the long term. And let's discuss that. A county clerk's office is simply there primarily to record the incoming documentation related to a real estate transaction. So for example, a deed and mortgage. It is there for the purposes of establishing a legal record of transfers, but also for establishing what we call in the legal arena as priority. Priority means that one person's mortgage, let's say, or note, takes precedence over another person's mortgage or note based upon the day that it's recorded, meaning who records first. Kentucky is what's called a race notice state, meaning that's the first person to record at the courthouse takes priority over the next person. The notice requirement means that that is true unless the first person knew that the second person should have been in front of them. But that is what the county clerks primarily do as it relates to real estate transactions. Well, when they close, that interrupts this priority recordation process. And that means it kind of throws into question whether or not a first mortgage is actually ahead of a second mortgage, to use layman terms. And as a result, that could affect whether or not people want to provide financing. For example, if you were buying a new home, the first lender would very much like to make sure that they are in first position should anything go wrong, as opposed to being in second or third position. So the county clerk's office not being open affects both the ability to record and potentially the ability to check and make sure that the title is clear and that you are going to be able to get that priority position. Now, there is some good news though. My understanding is that the county clerk's office, even those that are closing, are intending to keep one person there to both date and stamp incoming mailed recordings. Now, what does that mean? That means that if a first mortgage, let's say, is received on Tuesday and the second mortgage is received on Wednesday, they will have been placed in the area that indicates what day they came in. Though I am not sure if the date and actual time will be stamped on the actual document, my guess is that it will not. So that could create a little bit of an issue on priority if both of the documents come in on the same day. However, this is not completely unusual to have this sort of gap between when a document is actually signed and when a document is actually recorded. This has actually gone on for a lot of years. And what happens is that the title insurance companies that are backing these transactions, like in almost every residential transaction that involves financing, typically has title insurance. And many involving cash transactions, or for the most part, typically have title insurance as well. What has happened is that at a closing now, you sign all the documents, and then there's this period between when they sign and when they get it to the courthouse. And this is called in the insurance industry the gap period. Now, in the olden days, you had to wait while somebody ran down to the courthouse, made sure the title was still clear, recorded it, and then they came back. Well, that hasn't been that way for a lot of years, and that's because title insurance companies stepped up and said, we will insure you during this gap period, this period where something could happen, but the odds of it happen aren't very likely. So what the title insurance companies have done is say, we are still comfortable waiting on this recording, even if your county clerk's office is closed. We will extend the gap period until they reopen, with the understanding as of right now that that'll be in 2 weeks. And it's my understanding from talking to closing attorneys and closing agents that at least 3 of the major title companies in the state have agreed to do that. That's good. And the only thing that they are requiring is that each party, the buyer and the seller, and they may differ, but this is essentially what they're requiring, each party will have to sign an indemnity agreement related to that gap period. Meaning the seller will have to say something along the lines of, since you last run the title or created the commitment, I haven't done anything to encumber the property anymore, and if I had, I recognize that I'm responsible for it even after the closing date. That is really abridging an otherwise longer document, which is 2 to 3 pages, but that's the essential effect of it. It is a guarantee to the title company that if I'm not the one in complete possession of what I'm saying I am, you can come after me. There is a similar one, an indemnity agreement that is going to be with the buyer as well. And that'll essentially be saying, buyer, you're not aware of any judgment liens or anything against you that might affect our title policy. And in addition, you're not going to run out right away and try to record something ahead of our recording or our lender's recording that is mentioned in the title opinion or title policy. So that's what there's going to be. So if you go to a closing right now, you're going to see these documents in all likelihood if your county clerk's office is closed. Now, for those of you whose county clerk's office is not closed, you probably won't see these documents. But because typically many counties tend to follow the lead of other counties, you need to start concerning yourself about whether or not this may happen. And one of the best ways to do that is to prepare your clients in advance as to this eventuality. Talk to them and tell them, look, right now, our county clerk's office is open and we don't think this will affect your recording or your closing. However, if it does, here's what's happening right now. Explain to them that right now it's still working. The title industry is stepping up and filling this gap, but you may have to sign an additional document. Now, if they start asking a lot of questions about this additional document or the legal effect of it, your primary thing to do is not to attempt to explain it to them. It is to either A, refer them to the closing attorney to see, or closing agent to see if they can explain it, or to get a copy of what they're going to eventually be signing, and B, to tell them to seek the legal counsel of their own if they have questions. And this is for both the buyer and the seller. My recommendation to you is to not to give them legal advice as to this issue, but to instead refer them to their own lawyer. Now, what's the practical effect of this? Primarily, the effect is that the seller, even though they have transferred the property, has not quite closed, okay? Meaning that there are still lingering effects that may be there. One of them, which we don't have a real answer to yet, is potentially insurance. And that is something that they should contact their home insurance provider to see what happens in this situation and what do we need to do. The same with your buyer. Your buyer, while technically has created a transfer that is recognized between the buyer and seller, there may still be some other issues floating out there. And so that the closing, while possession may transfer, there are still recordation issues and issues with what the general public sees if they're trying to see who actually owns the property. Meaning that if your client tries to go and say, get another loan or what have you, they may not show up. So they're going to have to wait till that recording actually happens. Again, the main thing to do is if you're in the county that is closed, talk to your client, explain to them what's going to happen at the closing. And to those of you that are in counties to which it has not closed but may close, let your clients know about this eventuality so that they're not shocked and are not caught surprised with having to sign a document they had known nothing about. Well, thank you very much, and hopefully this will help you get through this crisis and continue on in your daily real estate lives.